Hi there, my name is Masood and I lead Bottom Line Analytics in the UK. I'm joined by my colleague Michael Wolf, CEO of Bottom Line Analytics in the US. This is a recording of a live webinar that took place on the 12th of July 2016. Okay, so the agenda for today is as follows. Firstly, a very quick introduction to Bottom Line Analytics. This will be followed by the measurement dilemma around sports sponsorships, which is a notoriously difficult area to measure, at least accurately. We'll then look at our approach to measuring sports fan engagement and also go through a case study within the B2B sector. Unfortunately, there'll be no Q&A session today, but if anybody does have any questions after having viewed this, please feel free to email them to us directly. Bottom Line Analytics is an independent, full-service analytics agency focusing on measurement. So much of our time is spent around measuring the communications and media effect on sales and the financial return on investment. Of course, we get involved in other brand performance analytics such as pricing, segmentation, forecasting, and so forth. We have lots of experience within the team, especially around market research, insight, and ROI measurement. We're dedicated to innovation within analytics and consumer insight, so we're consistently trying to push the boundaries with data and trying to answer the more difficult questions. Everything that we do is geared towards improving commercial performance. So trying to save more and make more for our clients is our primary goal. Okay, so at this point I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Michael Wolf, who will take you through the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Masood. Now what we want to do is we want to focus our effort on talking about the ROI measurement of sports sponsorship and why this is a dilemma and why this is a dilemma that has high stakes. For many companies, sponsorship marketing represents a major element of their marketing mix. Personally, for myself, I spent 8 years at the Coca-Cola Company. We all know Coca-Cola is an official sponsor of the Olympic Games and also the FIFA World Cup Soccer. These were substantial investments within Coke's marketing mix, and it's really imperative to try to understand what kind of returns you're getting for those sizable investments. So what are those investments? Frankly, sports marketing is a very big business. Globally, we estimate $60.2 billion is spent behind sports sponsorship marketing, and it's growing at a relatively healthy rate in 2016 of about 5%. This is larger than the spending on the largest single product category, which is automotive, which is only about $42 billion. So it is the largest identified category compared to all marketing expenditures. And it's actually about 10% of total ad spend worldwide. But for sponsorship marketing, even despite these large investments, the successful efforts to really measure what we call the dollars and cents ROI of sponsorships are rare. The reason for this is that the gold standard of marketing measurement, we call marketing mix modeling, has tended to come up short in ways to really accurately measure the total return on investment in a dollars and cents perspective. And we'll give you some examples of that later on in this talk. And a recent study by Performance Research Institute and IAG found that a total of 40% of all sponsors really don't spend a lot of money, less than 1% of their sponsorship budgets on any kind of measurement, metrics, and so on and so forth. And probably the reason for that is these are also the ones that express considerable dissatisfaction with their company's ability to measure the dollars and cents ROI of these events. So given this dilemma, given the shortfalls in prior measurement approaches, what's the answer? I think that probably the best thing to understand is coming from a quotation by Kevin Roberts, who is the global CEO of Saatchi and Saatchi Advertising Agency, and he said that that sponsorships as an investment are going to get obliterated if they just simply measure awareness and eyeballs, because these are the wrong approaches in today's age. Sponsorships are all about emotions. And most of them are actually sold on rational logic. This doesn't really make sense. If I were a sponsor property today, I would be investing my money into new techniques that in some way attempt to measure the emotional connectivity of the fans to the activities and sports that they are following, and in some way will predict their future involvement. So the whole idea, the rationale behind sports sponsorship marketing is advertisers and marketers recognize the emotional passion and connection that fans have towards sports or events. They in some way want to connect with that. So investment in sports marketing is in effect a way of trying to generate that kind of connection to their brand that the fans are demonstrating towards their sports. So the bottom line is that really successful measurement, and particularly monetary measurement of sports sponsorship, need in some way to rely on metrics which somehow capture this emotional connectivity. So from a general high viewpoint, here's the approach that we've recommended. We have a method that actually converts textual data, most often from reviews on social media postings, but from any written online source, including the many blogs on sports activities and sporting events that exist online. So we would mine those comments, and we would turn those comments into a metric. And we use an approach that is based upon a principle called stance shift analysis. To give you an idea, is that when there is a shift in a conversation or in a written posting that is followed by a conjunction like a but or an and, but any kind of shift, we find that fans are expressing their judgment and beliefs and opinions towards the particular brand or the particular sponsorship property. And when they do so, they often explain why they're so passionate, why their opinion is as strong as it is. When they do so, they also express emotions. So we evaluate and score different emotional words, adjectives, and adverbs in their statements. And we also look for agency. So when somebody expresses an ownership for a team or a sport, like my Chicago Bears, we find that they are people who make a personalized connection, have a higher level of engagement. So all of these are the factors using the science of linguistics and language in order to score, and this is what affects our scoring mechanism. So the name of our metric is called the Semantic Engagement Index, or the SEI. The next question is, if this is a metric or a group of metrics that's aggregated to a single metric, which is the case here, that we collect over time by looking at textual reviews, how good is it? How well does it fit actual sales or behavior, customer behavior? And here's just a few examples of very high statistical correlations. In fact, we've applied this in 28 different brands across many categories in multiple countries. And the average statistical correlation is approximately 80%. So fundamentally, our approach has benefit in that it is actually quite predictive of sales. So that means we can actually put this in a predictive model and derive some insight and actually measure the revenue and ROI impact of these sponsorships. And this is what we're going to show you now with an actual case study. The client here is a large, well-recognized business-to-business services organization. We have named them for confidentiality reason Alpha Corporation. They were very interested in using this approach for helping them understand 4 major sponsorship properties that they were funding. And these sponsorship properties actually constituted 60% of every marketing dollar they spent during the time we were engaged with them. These activities include PGA golf. They actually had their own named PGA golf tournament. NASCAR racing. They sponsored a number of NASCAR race car drivers. NFL football. And also NCAA College March Madness basketball. Again, we call this company Alpha Corporation. Alpha's major objective from this exercise was to come up with a way to better approach the measurement, the ROI and the actual dollars and cents measurement of these pertaining to these 4 sponsorship properties. Their situation at the time is they were facing rather stagnant business performance. Just 2% year-over-year growth in their total business. So they were keenly interested in ways to not just better understand the monetary dollars and cents ROI of all of their marketing, including and especially these 4 sponsorship properties, but also to gain insights that will help them spend their future resources more effectively and actually drive a higher level of growth. So they were doing this because they were looking for improved performance. So the task before us is the first thing we do is text mine thousands of fan comments across social media and other sources. And we can see some examples of those here across these 4 sponsorship properties. So once we text mine these social media conversations and online customer reviews, we apply our language or linguistics approach algorithm to score this textual data. That is, convert them into metrics. Metrics which will distill the important elements of each property that drives the engagement and passion of the sports fan. Once we do this, we then turn to advanced analytics. We put this inside of what we call a marketing or media mix model. And all of these over time series based trended data form an ability to actually predict sales outcomes, which is our objective here. So just as a refresher, a marketing mix model consists of 2 things: a bunch of inputs and a single output, which in this case is the sales or revenue, retail revenue of this Alpha Corporation. Included in here are these SEI measures over time of these 4 sponsorship properties: basketball, NFL football, PGA golf, and NASCAR. In addition to that, all other media activities, both mass media or offline media and digital media activities, were included in the model, plus operational factors, pricing, market penetration, and seasonal effects. All of these are inputs designed to predict and link to actual sales on a period-by-period basis. Once we've developed a model, we're able to view, as you see here, what the overall impact of each marketing activity is. As you see here, these 4 sponsorships collectively generated incremental revenue or sales equal to 13% of the total revenue of Alpha Corporation. And you can see how this is divided among the 4 properties, with NFL football showing the largest effect, followed by basketball, PGA golf, and lastly by NASCAR. Thinking about the fact that they spent 60% of their marketing dollars on these sponsorships, actually generated a higher than fair share of incremental revenue. 66% of the total marketing incremental revenue came from these 4 sponsorships. Very encouraging. So once we've developed this overall and monetized all the marketing mix elements, including these individual 4 sponsorships, we merge that with expenditures and margin data, and we can come up with some ROI projections. As you notice here on the bar chart, the gray one on the right was actually a similar modeling exercise that had been done the year before. And what it's shown is that is common, and remember what I see that analytics has fallen short, is oftentimes traditional marketing mix models will often show that these activities do not break even financially, which is the case here, 79 cents per dollar spent. So actually losing about 21 cents per dollar from a profitability standpoint. But with our approach, we get something a little bit more robust. Total ROI was $1.51 per dollar spent. That included $1.74 for basketball, which was the most profitable event, followed secondly by NFL football, thirdly by PGA golf, and lastly by NASCAR racing. So you remember that one of the objectives of Alpha Corporation was to use the insight from this model in order to make smarter decisions on how to budget their resources for the next year. So in order to do that, we show this graphic or grid. The vertical axis represents an index of the ROI that we just showed you. Basketball is on top, followed by NFL, PGA, and lastly NASCAR. The horizontal axis represents the impact that each of these sports properties had on the year-over-year growth. So if the objective of Alpha is to drive higher growth, which we can all assume, NFL sponsorship stood out both as high ROI and a significantly higher role in contributing to year-over-year growth. So logically, we would look to NFL as probably our first area to increase our investment. We actually go through a spending optimization exercise. So what these bars represent is $200 million at the bottom, and how that was allocated across the 4 sports properties and all other media. The middle bar represents the current spending allocation. The left bar shows the incremental revenue that each of these investments generated. And as you can see, the largest in total absolute size of the 4 properties was NFL football. but wasn't the largest in terms of the ROI. The bar on the right shows a simulation where we simply reallocate the 200 million and move dollars from the less to the more productive activities. And you can see that the recommendation shows increases both in substantial increases in NCAA basketball, NFL football, especially NFL football, and also PGA golf, but cutting back a little bit on NASCAR, which we showed you before, had the lowest ROI, and then all other media. So by reallocating those dollars in a smarter, more effective fashion, we show that they could grow their total revenue by 7%. That's an estimate, without requiring incremental total investment. So this is just taking the same 200 million and reallocating it in a more effective fashion. So what do we recommend to the client? Just to sum up, to expand investments in the most profitable and most growth-driving, particularly NFL and NCAA basketball, while cutting back on the least profitable activity, NASCAR. But remember, total ROI for all sponsorship was substantially positive, much stronger than prior efforts had shown. So we think we're getting a more holistic and we think better measure of sports sponsorship dollars and cents ROI from that. So 1 year later, what happened? Well, it didn't exactly grow 7%, just 6%. So they actually improved their overall performance from a rather stagnant 2% growth to a more robust 6% year-over-year increase. They were happy and achieved what they were hoping to do. So now I think you can understand why we're so excited about this approach. We think it gives a broader, more holistic, and we think a better way of looking at ROI of sports.
Thank you, Mike. Just as a footnote then, I'd like to say that whilst much of the discourse today has been around sports sponsorship properties, this approach actually works for celebrity sponsorships and large-scale experiential events as well, with and without gamification. In terms of getting started then, the first thing that we would want to do is to explore the data and understand your objectives, KPIs, and also get an understanding of the language that is reserved for different sports. We would then go and mine the historic text corpus from across social and digital media, and often we can do this using off-the-shelf listening tools. The next stage is for us to then develop engagement metrics for each individual sports property alongside creating a data inventory, so periodic sales, media, and other metrics are required before we then go on to do a measurement exercise to understand sales contribution, financial ROI of each sponsorship property, much like what you've seen already today. Here's a bit of a background to Bottom Line Analytics Global, Michael Wolf in the US and myself in the UK. Thank you so much for listening. Here's our contact details for any questions, queries or comments.